Over the 10 years that I have been driving shipments across the country, I've seen a lot of things. Some of them were truly beautiful sights, while others might end up haunting you for the rest of your life. For instance, you never really know what to expect when you enter a truck stop or gas station bathroom. On a good day, the restroom might be recently cleaned out and is entirely empty aside from you, but on a bad day, let's just say they can get pretty bad. I'll never forget the time that I was driving through Louisiana, making my way to Florida to drop off a shipment. At the time, I had been doing a lot of overnight driving and sleeping during the daytime. It was a really efficient method for a while because of how empty the roads were after midnight. I never really had to worry about a traffic jam. My biggest issue on those night drives was either one or two things. One, where am I going to stop for food? After 11 p.m. it becomes increasingly harder to find a fast food place that's open. And the second issue was often the more serious of the two. Where can I find a good place to use the bathroom? That night, I was mainly dealing with the second problem. And at this point, it was around 1 in the morning, and it started looking like I was going to have to pull off on the side of the road and run into the woods to use the bathroom really fast. But luckily, I was saved by a sign. The sign pointed out that there was a Shell gas station half a mile down the road, and according to the sign, it also had a truck stop attached to it, which told me that there was a restroom there. I continued to make my way down the road toward the gas station, and when I finally made it there, I was surprised. Most of the Shell stations that I would stop at were larger than most gas stations, especially if they supposedly had a truck stop attached to them, but not this time. As I pulled into the parking lot, I saw one of the smallest, poorly lit gas stations I had ever seen. And after taking a second look, I could tell that this gas station had been abandoned for at least a year or two. I thought about continuing on down the street, but I decided I couldn't wait any longer. I parked the truck off to the side of the parking lot and got ready to hop down from my seat when I hesitated. Something struck me as odd about this gas station. Aside from the fact that it looked like there was no one around for miles, there was also this strange, distinct smell in the air. All I could do was pray that it wasn't coming from the restrooms. I continued to get out of my truck and lock the door behind me as I made my way toward the gas station. And as I got closer to the building, I kept my eyes glued to the floor to make sure I didn't step in anything. That was when I noticed a slight discoloration in the pavement. Most of the ground was a dull, dark gray color, but there was a section of the parking lot that looked like there had been some sort of oil spill or something. I just walked right past it and made my way around the back of the gas station in hopes that the restrooms were still unlocked. When I got to the restroom door, I couldn't help but notice more markings on the ground that looked like the same stain that was in front of the store. Once again, I ignored it though and began to open the restroom door. That was when it hit me. As soon as I opened the door, a scent came pouring out of the bathroom that sent me practically stumbling backward. Gagging from how horrible the stench was, I knew that I still needed to go, whether it was disgusting or not. So I took my bandana that I always kept in my back pocket and wrapped it around my face to try to help the smell. I took a deep breath before opening the door again and tried to be as quick as possible with getting in and out of the restroom. And as soon as I stepped inside, I realized what it was that I was smelling. Laying in the center of the bathroom floor was the body of a man who appeared to have been dead for quite some time. As soon as I saw the body and realized that the horrible stench was the smell of a decomposing corpse, I ran out of the bathroom as fast as I could and began throwing up. I quickly made my way back to my truck and began calling the police, who came and examined the body. After giving them my statement, I was able to be on my way, which was good because I couldn't be late with my shipment. But as quick of an experience as that was, I will never forget that horrible smell. When I first got into truck driving as a career, my father used to tell me about these stories about guys that he knew that used to drive big rigs. According to him, a lot of them used to have firearms with them in their trucks to keep them safe while they were out on the road. Nowadays, though, at least for the company that I work for, you're not allowed to carry weapons in your truck because if someone got hurt, it would end up being the company that got into trouble. That being said, I can understand why drivers feel like they need something to protect themselves. You never know what sort of situation you might find yourself in. I learned the hard way that you never know what to expect when it comes to being out on the road. It all went down when I was out delivering a shipment for a Kohl's distribution center that had me driving through Illinois. I found myself passing through the Chicago area, and by the time the traffic had dialed itself down a lot, it was probably around 9:30 at night when I found myself being rerouted by the truck's GPS. Apparently, a road had been closed up ahead, so I had to take a short detour. The GPS said that it was only supposed to tack on an extra 35 minutes to my trip, but along the way, things got really hairy. As I was making my way through the new route, I couldn't help but notice it was taking me through a residential neighborhood. Now, it was dark out, so I couldn't quite tell, but from the looks of things, it was like I was driving through a ghost town. Hardly any of the homes that I slowly passed by appeared to have anyone living in them, and many looked like they were in the process of being demolished. For a minute, it was like there was no life around me. That changed the second I turned a corner onto a different block. There were only a few people outside, but I could see a group of friends hanging out on the sidewalk in front of one of the houses. It was nothing too out of the ordinary, so I just continued to drive. However, I would learn that those kids that I saw hanging out were actually lookouts for some of the local gang members in the area. I only found this out when I ended up filing a police report about what happened next. As I continued driving, I started to notice what looked like taillights up ahead, which I assumed was just someone that had stopped at an intersection. However, as I approached the vehicle, I began to notice some things that made me feel a bit uneasy. I noticed that there were multiple men with their hoods up standing on either side of the street. And to make matters worse, as soon as I passed one of the cars that had been parked on the side of the road, it started up and pulled out right behind me. I was blocked in. I brought the truck to a stop behind the car that was sitting at the intersection, and within a matter of seconds, I had people at both of the doors of my truck, one of which was pointing a handgun of sorts through the driver's side window, right at my head. I lifted my hands off the steering wheel as one of the men began to order me to get out of the truck. I didn't question him at all and began unbuckling my seatbelt and hopping out of the vehicle. As the man continued to point his gun at me, I saw another hop into the truck and get into the driver's seat. All of the vehicles, including my truck, pulled away from the scene, and I was left there surrounded by 5 men, all grasping their firearms tightly. I thought I was done for. I couldn't even begin to figure out a way for me to make it out of this situation. But to my surprise, they took my wallet and cell phone and then sent me walking in the direction that I had come in. With every step away from them that I took, I was worried that I might hear the sound of gunshots. But thankfully, all I could hear was the sound of the men getting into the other cars that had been parked on the side of the road and then driving away. I made my way to the nearest police station and reported the incident. And honestly, the officers didn't look surprised. I guess carjackings are a normal thing in that area. All in all, they never found the merchandise that was taken. But thankfully, I managed not only to keep my life, but also my job. Do you remember that show, Ice Road Truckers? I used to love that show, especially as a driver myself. Now, I was never in a scenario where I had to drive my massive rig over a frozen lake or anything like that, but I will tell you right now that an icy road can be a death trap for anyone in a truck. It only takes one little slip and you can end your life or the life of somebody else. Driving in the winter is a truly terrifying thing in some states, and I will never forget the time that I almost lost my life on the road that I must have driven down almost 100 times. It was back when I used to drive trucks for a local company, which meant that I was typically only ever driving from the distribution center to the stores in my area. And it was a great gig. I mean, it's one of the few times as a trucker that I actually got to spend almost every night with my family. It also meant that I was driving the same route over and over again. And after a while, they sort of became like second nature. That is until winter hit. This year was projected to be a particularly cold one, and almost every day there was warnings about black ice accumulating on the roadways. So I knew that now, more than any other time in the year, I had to be vigilant and pay attention to the street in front of me. That being said, you can do everything right and still end up slipping. On the day of my accident, everything started out just fine. I knew the roads had the potential to be bad, so I made sure to prepare myself and drive a bit slower than usual, especially when I made it onto one of the main roads in our area known as Crawford Street. Crawford was a very scenic mountain road that was absolutely beautiful to drive down under the right conditions. However, due to how windy the road was, I knew that it was going to be a problem for me that day. As soon as I made it onto Crawford, I could see the patches of ice lining the shoulders, and right away I began slowing down and driving very carefully. I must have made it about halfway down the road without an incident before I felt it. More than one of the tires on my passenger side must have touched the ice because I could feel them sliding. Out of nowhere, I felt the steering wheel begin to pull to the right as I continued going down the road. I tried to correct it, but that, coupled with more than one of my tires being unable to grip the road, my truck began to fishtail. I tried not to panic, but there was nothing I could do as I began barreling toward the guardrail on the side of the road, knowing full well that there was no way that I would be able to stop my truck from going off the side of the hill. As soon as my truck broke through the rail, I felt it pull to the side as the trailer hooked to the back began to roll down the hill, taking the cab and myself down with it. I had been buckled in, and the hill wasn't too large, so the truck only rolled about 1.5 times. Thankfully, my only injury came from the shards of broken glass from all the windows shattering around me. It left me with a few lacerations, but when the truck finally came to a stop, I was able to unbuckle myself and crawl out of the cab before anything serious happened. I looked up to the section of the guardrail that I had torn through and was simply happy to be alive. I will never forget the feeling of being flipped around as the truck began rolling down the hill, and driving through the wintry road will be forever something that puts me on edge.
Are you ready to dive into the darkest depths of fear and suspense? Don't miss out on our latest spine-chilling tales and terrifying encounters. Subscribe now to Dark Tales, Horror Stories, and join our community of brave souls who dare to explore the unknown. Hit the subscribe button below and prepare yourself for a journey into the shadows. Subscribe now and let the nightmares begin.